like a breath of cold air. By December, Montreal was buried under a heavy coat of snow that had been piling up since late October. Gray slush lined the streets, the result of salt and traffic grinding the once pristine snow into a dirty, icy mess. The biting cold cut through even the thickest coats, and the endless scraping of shovels and snowplows provided a constant backdrop to city life. Holiday decorations were everywhere, but their cheer felt commercial, more of a reminder to spend money than a celebration. The air smelled faintly of exhaust and wet wool, the kind of scent that lingered in crowded metro stations and poorly insulated homes. Yet, as Veronique walked through the city streets, her boots crunching against the fresh snow, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She'd always loved the holidays. As a child, she'd marveled at the shimmering decorations, the sound of boots crunching against ice, and the occasional scent of poutine wafting from nearby diners. But this year, the joy seemed oddly hollow, as if it were a beautiful facade masking something dark and unspoken. She paused at the corner by Sherbrooke, her breath curling in front of her in frosty puffs. It wasn't just the odd unease she'd felt all week. There were other signs, too. Small things that would have gone unnoticed if she weren't already on edge. Like the fact that the street lights on Peel Street flickered every time she passed, even though they stayed steady for everyone else. Or the elderly woman at the grocery store who stared at her just a little too long, her milky eyes narrowing in suspicion before she hurried away. Then there was the panhandler. Brian had been a fixture outside McGill University's McLennan Library for as long as Veronique could remember. Now in her third year, she'd often passed him on her way to classes. Wrapped in layers of tattered coats and scarves, he was well known among the students, who occasionally dropped coins into his cup. Brian had a reputation for getting himself thrown in jail during the harshest nights of winter, a desperate but effective way to stay warm. Last year, however, everything had changed. Brian had started muttering about the Winter Watcher, claiming to have seen him lurking in the city. His stories grew more frantic, and the locals dismissed him as crazy. Then, one night, Brian's body had been found in an alley, his lifeless form curled against the icy ground. Officially, it was chalked up to exposure, but his wild claims lingered in Veronique's mind. Lately, she'd been seeing Brian again, or at least she thought she had. Every time Veronique walked by the library, he'd be sitting there, looking directly at her, his eyes impossibly sharp and knowing. But no one else seemed to notice him. When she asked Tara, her friend had just laughed nervously. "Brian's been gone for a year, Veronique. Maybe you're just remembering him." And when she glanced back, it was as if he'd vanished into thin air. get a grip, Veronique muttered to herself, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. She glanced around the bustling street. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. People bustled into malls or hurried underground into the metro system to escape the biting wind. And yet, she still felt the weight of something looming just beyond reach. She turned toward Upstairs Jazz Bar and Grill on Bishop Street, a cozy spot where she could grab a reasonably priced lunch and momentarily escape the cold. As she walked, she couldn't shake the nagging sensation that Brian's ghostly presence had followed her. Even now, she felt as if a pair of eyes were drilling into her back, though every glance over her shoulder revealed nothing but bustling pedestrians. The regular waiter, Roman, who hailed from Poland, greeted her with a familiar nod. People like Roman weren't called baristas in the 1990s, but he knew her usual order by heart. "The usual, Veronique?" Roman asked, already reaching for a menu, but knowing she probably wouldn't need it. Veronique nodded, offering a half smile. She found a seat near the small stage, cradling her coffee as jazz music played softly in the background, its warmth seeping into her hands. She stared out at the bustling street, searching for what? She didn't know, but the feeling of being watched pressed against her back, making her fidget in her chair. "You okay?" Roman's voice startled her. He had appeared beside her, his concern etched across his features. "Yeah, I'm fine," Veronique said quickly. "Just tired, I guess." Roman hesitated, then nodded. "Well, let me know if you need anything." When he walked away, Veronique caught sight of something in the reflection of the window. The panhandler from outside the library, standing still as stone on the opposite side of the street. She whipped her head around, but the spot was empty. The crowd moved on, oblivious. Veronique's pulse quickened. She could have sworn she'd seen him. Not just anyone, either. It was unmistakably the same man. His ragged layers and piercing gaze haunted her thoughts. She shook her head, taking a long sip of her mocha. Maybe she was imagining things. That night, the whispers returned. Veronique lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding in the dark. The murmurs were faint, but unmistakable, as if coming from the walls themselves. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving the room in suffocating silence. Veronique reached for her phone, its glow a small comfort in the oppressive dark. She typed a quick text to her best friend, Tara. "I think I'm losing it." Weird noises in the house again. A reply came almost instantly. "Want me to come over?" Veronique hesitated. She didn't want to drag Tara into this. Whatever this was. "No, I'll be fine. Just needed to tell someone." She set the phone down and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. When it finally did, her dreams were restless. a blur of faceless figures, snow turning crimson, and the sound of bells tolling deep and low. The next morning, Veronique decided she needed answers. If she didn't do something, the unease would consume her. She started with the McGill Library, its towering stone facade dusted with fresh snow. The interior smelled of aged paper and varnished wood. The librarian, Mrs. Haversham, greeted her with a kind smile. "Researching something special?" Veronique hesitated, unsure how to phrase her question without sounding unhinged. "Actually, have you ever heard of anything strange happening around here? Like weird stories or legends?" Mrs. Haversham's smile faltered. "Strange how? I don't know. Just things that don't feel right. Or people seeing things that aren't there." The librarian's gaze sharpened. She glanced around to make sure they were alone before leaning in. "You're not the first to ask questions like that. This city has its quirks, let's say, especially around this time of year." "What do you mean?" Veronique pressed, her pulse quickening. Mrs. Haversham hesitated. "There's an old story about someone called the Watcher. It's just a folk tale, of course, but some say he appears in times of great personal unrest. They say he watches, waiting for something. But here's the strange part. Only the one he's watching can see him." Veronique swallowed hard. "Have you seen him?" The librarian's face darkened. "No, and I hope I never do." That evening, Veronique found herself standing in her living room, staring at the Christmas tree she'd painstakingly decorated the week before. The ornaments gleamed under the soft glow of the fairy lights, but the sight brought her no comfort. Mrs. Haversham's words echoed in her mind. The Watcher. She'd looked up the story online when she got home. Most of the information was vague, but the consistent thread was that he appeared during moments of deep vulnerability, as if drawn to people who felt unseen themselves. The knock at the door made her jump. She turned, her heart racing. It was probably Tara, she told herself, though a chill crept over her as she remembered the last time she'd seen Brian. Was he outside again? Could ghosts knock? But when she opened the door, no one was there. Just the cold wind and the faint sound of carolers in the distance. She stepped outside, peering into the night. Snow fell softly, blanketing the world in an eerie stillness. Then she saw him, Brian, standing at the end of her driveway. There was no mistaking it. His tattered layers and unblinking stare were as vivid as they had been when he was alive. She wanted to call out, to demand answers, but her voice caught in her throat. The figure didn't move, only watching her with an intensity that froze her in place. Veronique's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back inside, slamming the door and locking it. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone to call Tara. But before she could dial, the whispers started again, louder this time, surrounding her. She clamped her hands over her ears, but it was no use. The lights flickered. Then, with a final, shuddering gasp, they went out. In the darkness, Veronique felt the weight of his presence. She didn't need to see him to know he was there, just beyond the door, watching, waiting, and for the first time, she understood what he wanted. Her. The next morning, Veronique's house stood as it always had, its cheerful decorations a stark contrast to the unease that lingered in the air. Neighbors passed by, unaware of what had transpired within those walls. But Veronique was gone, leaving behind only faint footprints in the snow leading toward the city streets. And in Montreal's busy streets, the holiday festivities carried on. But every so often, someone would pause, glancing over their shoulder, a fleeting sense of being watched brushing against their mind before disappearing like a breath of cold air. Cliffhanger by Lee Kendrick. I had never been to a tropical country before, but Indonesia was my friend's, and I chose a holiday destination after we had scanned the internet for tropical countries. We all agreed to go to the Indonesian island of Sumba, an island as large as Jamaica. Apparently, Indonesia boasts the most islands of any country. Unbelievably, over 17,000. My friends Michael, Bob, and I, Dave, had booked a holiday here for 2 weeks. We planned to do some snorkeling, exploring the coral reefs, and go on some boat trips to some of the Indonesian islands. For now, we were just chilling out on a sun lounger, drinking cold beers on the white sands of the Mbawana beach. The Sumba Island landscape is so rich in exotic plants and animal life. It also boasts unusual rock formations, including the Halfling Giant Stone. This is a coastal rock with a large gaping hole through it. In fact, me and the boys are just 30 feet away from it to our left. Another unusual thing about Indonesia is the Indian Ocean. It changes color, varying from turquoise to ultramarine blue to a remarkable golden orange. Another thing this part of the world is known for is its earthquakes and tsunamis. Just a few minutes ago, we felt a heavy earthquake, but this was normal for Indonesia. We were glad we weren't in a city full of buildings. The tremor only lasted for about 20 seconds, and then it just fizzled out. Nothing to worry about. Feeling hot, I decided to go for a dip in the ocean. As I slowly walked in the soft, powdery white sand towards the ocean, I sensed a foreboding. And for some reason, I noticed it was taking me longer than usual at this time of day to arrive by the ocean. I also observed pools of seawater with seaweed, crabs, and other sea creatures, which weren't there before. And I'm sure by now I would have been hearing the waves come crashing onto the beach. but the ocean seems much further away. Then it dawned on me as I stared out into the distance. There it was, a few miles away, a massive wall of water. Difficult to measure, but I would say it must be at least 50 feet high, and it was heading towards the beach. It was a tsunami. I had heard in documentaries about how the ocean suddenly withdraws from a beach, heralding a tsunami. Is this my time to die? I thought. I turned and ran as fast as I could, back towards my friends, wearing my stupid flip-flops. As I ran, I observed dozens of people lying on their beach towels, oblivious to what was about to happen. I attempted to shout to warn them, but no words would come from my mouth. I was unable to speak because I was in the grip of fear. I managed to attract a couple's attention, but they just waved back at me and continued sunbathing. I picked up a heavy shell and threw it at them, and then pointed frantically towards the wall of death. I ran and ran, painfully slowly, getting closer towards my friends. Then my friends Michael and Bob saw me. I waved with both hands, frantically in desperation, to try and warn them as I pointed back to the ocean. They just seemed to ignore me. Finally, I reached Michael and Bob to pull them away. My larynx was constricted, paralyzed. I couldn't utter one word as I pointed back towards the ocean. A bloody, gigantic blue-green wave was only a couple of 100 yards away. By now, there were people screaming everywhere on the beach. We all started running. But where? Where do we go? Do you climb a tree? The waves are too high. Do we try to outrun it? No. It's too close behind us, and it must be moving at over 100 per now. Do we go left or right? Maybe the wave isn't as long as the beach. Very unlikely we could escape it. It probably stretches as far as the length of the beach. We kept on running in front for our lives. As the adrenaline coursed through our veins, I spotted the cliff some 50 yards away. The tsunami was now so close behind us, you could hear its thunderous roar, like a wild beast after its prey. As we managed to reach the cliff, we climbed as rapidly as we could, managing some 30 feet, when the wave crashed heavily into the cliff. It demolished the halfling giant stone and engulfed the surrounding area. The beach had been swallowed up, and the ocean continued to climb, moving closer towards us. This wild beast wasn't done until it caught up with us, all three of us now exhausted, and like a gazelle, tired out with all its energy, spent. It was ready to drop and resign its fate to the beast chasing after it. I knew it was just only seconds away before the wave would claim me and my two friends. Suddenly, my heart stopped beating. To my horror, I was unable to lift my leg up to a ledge. It had got entangled in some plant's tendrils. Bob and Michael were too busy escaping to not notice me in trouble. The water was now up to my ankles, as I frantically moved my foot to budge it free. The boat just wouldn't move. By now, I resigned to the fact that I was going to drown. As a 26-year-old, I was hoping for longer on this earth, and I just wish Bob and Michael escaped the wave. The water was now rising up to my neck. I closed my eyes and saw flash images of my mother, dad, sister, and brother. But wait a moment. Why hasn't the water covered me yet? I thought. The next thing I noticed was the water level was going down. It was now down to my feet, and I was able now to budge my foot free. The water was drawing slowly away, down to where the ocean and beach would normally meet. I looked up to the top of the cliff, and there, looking down, were my two buddies, Michael and Bob, waving to me, laughing. We all had a miracle escape. Sadly, many tourists didn't, and the weight of secrets. The bar was a typical rough 1970s bar on the docks of London. It was a dark bar, cigarette smoke and stale beer in the air. A neon sign buzzed at the top of the room, casting an almost ghostly red light on the scene. It was a type of bar where secrets were told, debts were paid. A type of bar where men like Marcus knew not to linger. But tonight, he had no other options. He was seated in the last booth, facing the wall, a glass of whiskey half empty in front of him. The ice long melted, the drink as watered down as his nerves. His fingers tapped nervously against the table, and his eyes flicked to the door every few minutes. She was late. Of course she was. Claire had never done anything on time. It was a power move, a thing she had mastered when they were just kids pulling jobs together, before the messy world got messier, before trust became a precious commodity neither could afford. When she actually did walk into the room, it shrunk around her. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she had an energy that turned heads. She moved like she knew things other people didn't, like she could see the strings behind the curtain, the mechanism, and knew exactly how to pull them. She spotted him immediately, sliding into the booth across from him, a cocky little smile on her face. "I didn't actually think you'd come," Marcus muttered, taking a slow sip of his glass. Claire reclined in a cross-legged position. "You called." I was curious. That was what you could say about Claire. She didn't waste words. It was as if every sentence was measured, weighed, and heavy. Marcus rubbed his jaw, suddenly unsure how to begin. He had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his head, tortured himself with each word. But now, suddenly, all that preparation unraveled as he looked at her. "You don't belong here," he replied instead. Claire raised an eyebrow. "And yet, here I am." She motioned to his drink. "You gonna tell me why you called me out of the blue? Or are we just reminiscing?" Marcus exhaled slowly. He glanced around the bar. Nobody was watching, but that didn't mean there weren't watchers. Risked a trip out here was what he'd done. Hell, even whispering Claire's name when he did what he did was a risk. But he needed a trusted person to help. Or at least not rip his head off on sight. "We got a problem. I found something," he said. About the shipment. Claire's expression did not budge, nor her posture. Here she was, now listening. Really listening. "Go on," she said. Marcus hesitated. This was the moment. The point of no return. He could always backpedal, feign some excuse, play like this was whatever, but he didn't. "The shipment is not what they say it is," he said in a low voice. "It's not weapons." Claire tilted her head slightly. "Then what is it?" Marcus swallowed. His heart was in his throat. He had already said too much. "It's not good, Claire," he had the breath to say. "Worse than anything we've ever had before." She bent forward with her elbows on the table. "Marcus," her voice a silky, low drawl, steady but brittle, she said, "What's in the shipment?" His mouth felt dry. He glanced back at the barkeep, at the old guy behind the counter with a beer, a couple huddled away in the back. That one could be eavesdropping on us. "I can't," he said finally. "I've said too much." Claire sighed. "You do this every time. Look at you," she said, shaking her head. "You first attach, and then in the next breath, you detach without explanation. If you tell me nothing, you explain to me what the hell's going on here, or you waste my time." Marcus clenched his jaw. "I'm only trying to keep you alive." Claire eyed him up and down, piercing him with her gaze. "And who says I need saving? You don't understand," Marcus said, stepping closer. He dropped his voice to a whisper. "This isn't just a job, Claire. This is something else. Something bigger." She didn't blink. "Then explain it to me." He hesitated again. And that's when he saw it, a man in the bar, observing them from below the brim of a dark hat. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't talking. "He's literally just sitting there waiting for us," he said. Marcus's stomach dropped. They weren't alone. He reclined in his seat, trying to remain calm. He drained the remainder of his whiskey, then resolutely put the glass up on the table. "We're leaving," he said, almost to himself. Claire didn't argue. She just looked back and spotted the gentleman and nodded. She was up and moving before he was, gliding like a shadow while he scurried toward the door. The cool night air hit them like a slap as soon as they were outside. The streets were vacant, the city throbbing with the sort of silence that can only descend when there's danger close at hand. "Well, talk," Claire said, as soon as they were out of his sight. Marcus was running a hand through his hair. Thinking. "I should not have called you," he admitted. Claire grabbed his arm, halting him. "Marcus," he was looking at her, truly looking at her. seeing something he hadn't allowed himself to see until now. This was more than just another job for her. It wasn't just any payday. She wanted answers, and she wasn't going to let him off the hook without having him give them to her. Marcus exhaled. "The shipment," he said. "It's not weapons, it's people." Claire's mask broke for the first time. "What?" "They are actually smuggling people, Claire. And not just any people." He lowered his voice. "They're selling them, like cargo." Silence. Then, "Who?" "You know the answer to that already." Claire stared at him. "You're sure?" Marcus nodded. She fell quiet for a long beat. Then, at last, she took a long breath out. "Shit," she muttered. Marcus nodded again. "Yeah." She shook her head, ran a hand through her hair. "This is bad, Marcus. This is a real shit show." "I know." Claire raised her head to look at him, a sharp, calculating look in her eyes. "What's your plan?" He hesitated. He hadn't gotten that far, but Claire had always been faster than him. "I'm able." She straightened up. "First thing we do is we disappear, you and me. Because if they know, you are dead already." Marcus swallowed. "And then what?" A smile broke across her face, an old flame bursting into life in her eyes. "And then we burn them down." And at that moment, Marcus knew it was too late to go back. He had said too much, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was what needed to be said. The day Los Angeles. Changed. Sophia's spoon clinked against porcelain as she stirred her tea, the sound barely audible beneath the morning bustle of the morning brew. Outside the window, autumn painted the small town of San Bernardino in shades of amber and gold. So different from Los Angeles, where even fall seemed reluctant to interrupt the city's relentless energy. "You're stirring that tea to death," her mother observed, eyes crinkling with gentle humor. "Still not sleeping well?" Sophia looked up, caught in the act. Serenity Williams had always possessed an uncanny ability to read her daughter, even as cancer steadily claimed her strength. Today was a good day. Her mother sat upright without assistance, her silver-streaked hair neatly combed, her smile warm despite the hollowness in her cheeks. "Claire's having nightmares again," Sophia admitted. "And Mark's firm is restructuring, which means longer hours. I'm not sure this was the right time to visit, even for a weekend." Serenity reached across the table, her hand light but steady as it covered Sophia's. "There's never a perfect time for anything important. You're here now. That's what matters." The cafe hummed around them, baristas calling out orders, the espresso machine hissing, customers tapping away at their laptops or scrolling through their phones. On a wall-mounted television, the morning news rolled through its predictable cycle. Political tensions, economic forecasts, celebrity gossip. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapped around them like a familiar blanket. "Tell me more about Claire's school play," Serenity prompted, taking a careful sip from her cup. You said she landed the lead role? Sophia's face brightened. She's playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. You should see her practicing Somewhere Over the Rainbow around the house. Mark recorded her last rehearsal. I can show you. Her words trailed off as the cafe's television caught her attention. The news had switched to a traffic helicopter shot over Los Angeles. A routine segment showing the morning gridlock. The reporter's voice carried over footage of the 405 freeway, mentioning construction delays near Westwood, where Mark worked. Expect those delays to continue through the afternoon rush hour. Alternative routes are advised for. The screen flashed white. For a fraction of a second, Sophia thought it was a technical glitch. Then the blinding light resolved into something else. As two massive fireballs erupted over the Los Angeles skyline, twin terrifying mushroom clouds climbing into the atmosphere. The helicopter camera jolted violently, the image spinning as the reporter's voice cut off mid-sentence, static. Then, blackness. The morning brew fell silent. Every conversation halted mid-word. Every movement suspended. For 3 long seconds, no one breathed. Sophia felt the world contract to a pinpoint. Sophia let slip a tiny gasp. Her coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor. But she couldn't hear it. All she could see was that burning flower blossoming over her home, over Mark, over Claire. Sophia, her mother's voice seemed to come from miles away. Sophia, look at me. Sophia couldn't move, couldn't blink. At a loss for words, her body had turned to stone while her mind screamed. Around them, the stunned silence fractured. Someone gasped. A man at the counter swore loudly. A barista fumbled for the remote control, frantically changing channels. Each station showed variations of the same nightmare. Emergency broadcasts, confused anchors, footage of the explosion from different angles. What appears to be at least 2 nuclear detonations over Los Angeles. No official statement yet from authorities, advising all residents to shelter in place. Sophia's phone vibrated in her pocket. Her heart leapt. Mark? Claire? But when she pulled it out with trembling fingers, the screen displayed only an emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. She stared at the message, its cold, bureaucratic tone at odds with the catastrophe unfolding. Desperately, she tried calling Mark's number. Nothing. She tried Claire's phone. Nothing again. Each attempt met with the same automated message. All circuits are currently busy. Please try your call again later. That sterile, mechanical voice seemed to mock her panic. All circuits busy. As if this were just another holiday. with too many calls being placed at once, as if her world hadn't just collapsed into ash. Around them, the cafe erupted into chaos. People scrambled for phones, for exits, for any semblance of control. A businessman shouted into his dead cell about evacuations. A college student sobbed openly into her hands. The barista continued flipping channels frantically, as if one might suddenly offer reassurance. "Is it just LA?" someone demanded. "Are there other cities?" "My sister's in San Diego," a woman cried. "She's not answering. The terrorists might have finally developed a nuke." "No, it's gotta be an accident. Nuclear war, man. The Chinese, the Russians." Outside, ancient, long-disused air raid sirens began to wail. Through the window, Sophia could see people rushing down the sidewalks, some toward their cars, others seemingly without direction. A police cruiser sped past, lights flashing. Sophia's thoughts whirled like debris in a tornado. Mark and Claire, 12 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Was that close enough to the blasts? Had Mark gotten to Claire's school in time? Were they trying to leave the city or shelter in place? The questions multiplied, each more terrifying than the last. The spell binding Sophia's tongue broke, and she could finally speak. "I have to go back," she whispered. Then louder, "I have to go back to LA." Her mother's grip tightened around her wrist. "Sophia, breathe. Think. They need me." Panic clawed at Sophia's throat. "I need to find them." "Look at the TV," Serenity said firmly. Look, the television now showed aerial footage of highways leading out of Los Angeles. Gridlock, unlike anything Sophia had ever seen. Thousands of vehicles at a standstill, some abandoned as people continued on foot. The military conspicuously absent from every possible scene, advising against attempting to enter the Los Angeles metro area. Radiation concerns as far as 40 miles from the blast sites. National Guard has been activated. Sophia's phone buzzed again with the same emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. "I can't just sit here," Sophia hissed, tears finally breaking through her shock. "Mom, I can't." Serenity pulled herself up straighter, summoning strength that shouldn't have been possible in her frail body. When she spoke, her voice cut through the cafe's panic with surprising authority. "Listen to me, Sophia Ayala Williams. Your fear wants you to run, but running blind is how people get killed in disasters." She took Sophia's trembling hands in hers. "Breathe first, think second, act third. You taught Claire that, remember? When she gets overwhelmed, the mention of her daughter's name sent fresh pain through Sophia's chest. But she forced herself to inhale deeply. Once, twice. Her mother's eyes held hers, anchoring her to the moment. Mark is smart, Serenity continued. He knows to get Claire somewhere safe. He knows you're here with me. You charging into a nuclear disaster zone helps no one. But what if? No what-ifs yet. Facts first. What do we know? Despite herself, Sophia felt her analytical mind begin to engage. There were 2 explosions over Los Angeles. People were leaving the city, but the military does not seem to be reacting yet. There looked like a massive area of LA leveled by the explosion. Good. What else? Roads are jammed. The military will soon be blocking entry. There might be radiation. The reality of that word hit her anew, and she swallowed hard. Communications are overloaded, with everyone trying to check on their loved ones. The news cut to a press briefing where the perky smile of the blonde, blue-eyed, and comely presidential press secretary, incongruent to the chaos erupting, confirmed what everyone already knew. 2 nuclear devices had detonated over Los Angeles. Origin unknown. Casualty estimates pending. Military response underway. The potential for additional attacks could not be ruled out. And does everyone like my new lip gloss? The press secretary asked. I can't just wait here, Sophia whispered. I can't. Serenity studied her daughter's face. No, you can't. But you need a plan, not panic, for the next hour, as the world unraveled around them. Sophia and her mother remained at their table. The cafe transformed into an impromptu crisis center for the customers. The owner turned up the television volume, distributed free coffee, and allowed people to charge phones on every available outlet. Information trickled in. The blasts had occurred over downtown Los Angeles. Early estimates suggested the devices were relatively small by nuclear standards. Tactical nukes, like the RSM-56 Bulava, rather than strategic nuclear weapons. But devastating nonetheless. Sophia tried every communication method she could think of. Calls, texts, emails, and social media messages. Most failed, but occasionally a text would go through, only to receive no response. She left voice messages that grew increasingly desperate. I'm coming to find you. Wait for me. I love you both. Outside, the town of San Bernardino transformed. Police directed traffic at intersections. Lines formed at gas stations. The grocery store across the street was mobbed. People hugged strangers or argued violently about what to do next. And through it all, Serenity remained calm, her presence a counterweight to the mounting hysteria. She helped Sophia gather information, separating facts from rumors, while conserving her limited energy. The radiation reports are mixed, Sophia noted, scanning emergency updates on her tablet. Some areas might be relatively safe, especially with proper precautions. And Mark knows this, Serenity reminded her. He'll get Claire to safety if he can. If he can. The words hung between them, unaddressed. By mid-afternoon, Sophia had made her decision. she would return to Los Angeles, not in blind panic, but with purpose and preparation. Her mother didn't try to dissuade her. She recognized the determination in her daughter's eyes. "I'll be back for you," Sophia promised as she prepared to leave. "Once I find them, we'll all come back here." Serenity smiled sadly. "I know you will." She pressed something into Sophia's hand, a small silver locket containing a family photo. For luck, the drive that should have taken over an hour stretched before Sophia like an impossible gauntlet. Roads would be clogged. Gas might be scarce. And at the end waited either reunion or devastation. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, embracing Serenity carefully, conscious of her fragility. "Find them," Serenity replied simply. "Be smart. Be safe." As Sophia's car pulled away from the morning brew, Serenity Williams watched from the window. Sophia touched her fingers to the glass in silent farewell, praying that her mother, Serenity, and her daughter, Claire, would forgive her for the choice she'd been forced to make today. Between the mother who was dying and the family who might already be gone. The afternoon shadows grew long as Sophia's car raced along the westbound interstate back to Los Angeles. The main highways heading east had quickly become impassable, choked with the vehicles of fleeing civilians. Radio reports described mass evacuations from areas surrounding Los Angeles, the declaration of martial law, and conflicting radiation warnings. Sophia had expected gridlock all the way, but the lack of any vehicle but hers heading west made the drive that more unsettling. The traffic thinned as she approached LA. The further she drove, the emptier the roads became. She was alone on the freeway, a surreal experience on roadways normally congested at all hours. The emptiness carried its own warning. She was driving toward something everyone else was fleeing. Sophia's GPS had stopped working hours ago, but she didn't need it. 15 years in Los Angeles had etched these routes into her memory. Exit here, turn there, the familiar path home. As she crested the final hill that should have revealed their neighborhood, her headlights illuminated a transformed landscape. Where apartment buildings and shopping centers should have stood, there was absence, rubble, small fires, and just nothing. A perfect circle of annihilation. She pulled to the side of the road, stepping out into air that smelled wrong, like sulfur and ash and things that had no name. The evening was eerily quiet. No sirens, no voices, no wildlife, just the soft tick of her cooling engine and the blood rushing in her ears. Beyond the destruction's edge, buildings remained mostly intact, untouched save for their destroyed windows, as if a giant cookie cutter had stamped down from above, removing only what lay within its circumference. Their apartment had been 3 blocks inside what was now emptiness. Sophia walked forward in a daze, approaching the edge of obliteration. Something crunched beneath her shoes. Glass fused with asphalt, transformed by unimaginable heat. The boundary between existence and nothingness was shockingly abrupt. Mark wouldn't have had time to leave home and then driven to Claire's school, she reasoned desperately. He could have left early for his regular gym workout and could have driven straight to her. Her school must be outside this circle. They could still be alive. They must be. The distant growl of engines broke the silence. Headlights swept the devastation as a convoy of military vehicles rumbled into view. Camp Pendleton Marines, in full hazmat gear, disembarked, moving with half-practiced efficiency. One spotted her and approached, face obscured behind a protective mask. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to evacuate immediately." The faceless Marine barked. "My family," Sophia's voice cracked. "My husband and daughter, they lived here." The soldier's posture remained tense and rigid, clearly on edge. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There were no survivors within the blast radius. Radiation levels here are dangerous. We need to leave now." "But they might not have been home," she insisted. "My daughter's school. It must be outside the blast radius. My husband might have—" "Ma'am?" The soldier cut her off, not unkindly. "Secondary evacuation sites have been established for survivors. Check there. But you can't stay here. It isn't safe." As if to emphasize his point, a radiation detector at his belt emitted a persistent clicking that grew faster as they stood talking. "Where?" she demanded. "Where are these evacuation sites?" Before he could answer, another Marine approached rapidly. "Sir, we've got missile incoming." "What?" said the first Marine. "Bogey confirmed. ETA 2 minutes." The first Marine's demeanor changed instantly. "Everyone back to your vehicles. Move, move, move." Around them, the unit scrambled into motion, abandoning whatever task had brought them to ground zero. "What's happening?" Sophia asked, fear rising anew in her chest. The Marine gripped her arm. "Another missile, headed right for us. We need to go, now." "Another?" The words died in her throat as understanding dawned. This wasn't over. "Now," the soldier urged. "Get in your car and drive east as fast as you can. Don't stop until you're at least 50 miles out." Sophia stumbled back toward her vehicle, moving on autopilot. As she reached for the door handle, some instinct made her look up. There, cutting across the darkening evening sky, was a thin, white line, like a shooting star, moving in slow motion. But unlike a shooting star, it wasn't arcing away. It was descending, the third, markedly larger missile coming to finish what the first 2 had started. Sophia stood frozen, again at a loss for words. with her hand still extended toward her car door. The Marine shouted something at her, but his words were lost in the strange silence that had enveloped her consciousness. She watched the white line grow brighter and tracked its inevitable path toward the ruined city, toward her. In that moment, Sophia understood with perfect clarity what her mother had tried to teach her that morning. Some forces were beyond human control. Some decisions led only to different versions of the same ending. She thought of Mark and Claire. Whether they had perished already, or had they survived only to face this missile. She thought of her mother, alone in San Bernardino, watching the news and knowing her daughter would never return. Sophia's hand dropped from the car door. The approaching missile reflected in her eyes as she tilted her face skyward. There would be no scream, no lamentation, no running from what had already been decided. There was only the overwhelming weight of understanding. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning.